Maria was already struggling. Bills piled up, and her small apartment barely kept out the cold. One rainy afternoon, she saw an elderly man struggling to stand on a crowded bus. Without thinking, she stood up and offered him her seat. She had nothing to give, but she gave it anyway. She didn't know it then, but that simple act would change her life forever. The next day, a letter arrived, a letter that would bring her face to face with a kindness far greater than her own. Maria's life wasn't easy. She worked long hours as a cashier in a small store, and most of her paycheck went to taking care of her elderly mother, who had been sick for months. She lived in a cramped apartment, her only comfort being the quiet mornings before the chaos of the day began. Every night, she would lie awake, wondering if she was doing enough. She always felt she was just a step away from losing it all. But on this particular day, as she boarded the bus to work, Maria was more tired than usual. Her eyes were heavy from lack of sleep, and the weight of her problems seemed to press harder on her chest. She found a small empty spot near the window and sank into it, relieved to rest for just a few minutes. The bus rattled along the streets, and people packed in, some standing, some sitting, but everyone was silent, lost in their own worlds. Then, Maria saw him. An elderly man, bent over with age, struggling to hold onto a railing. He looked frail, his hands trembling, his face lined with years of hardship. He stood for a few moments, but it was clear he wasn't going to be able to keep standing much longer. Maria's heart twisted. She looked around, but no one else seemed to notice. Everyone else was absorbed in their phones or staring out the window. The man's knees buckled slightly, and Maria could see him steady himself by gripping the rail even harder. Without thinking, she stood up and gently tapped him on the shoulder. "Here, please," she said softly, offering her seat. The man looked at her, his tired eyes scanning her face. A flicker of surprise crossed his expression, and then a smile, small but grateful, appeared on his lips. "Thank you," he whispered, lowering himself onto the seat. Maria stood beside him, holding onto the rail, trying not to let the exhaustion show on her face. The bus continued its journey, but for Maria, time seemed to slow. The gesture had been simple, but something about it felt significant. There was no grand reason behind it, she just couldn't bear to see someone struggle when she had the power to help. When her stop arrived, she gathered her things and left the bus, but her heart felt lighter somehow. Little did she know, the act of kindness she had just offered would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The next morning, Maria was running late. The store was busy, and she barely had time to grab breakfast before rushing out the door. The day dragged on, each hour stretching longer than the last. She couldn't stop thinking about the old man from the bus. There was something about his smile that stuck with her, and for a brief moment, she wondered if maybe there was more to life than just surviving. But then reality hit her, she couldn't afford to daydream. There were bills to pay and a mother who needed her. After her shift ended, Maria walked home in the early evening. The streets were quieter now, but her mind felt crowded. She wasn't used to feeling good about anything. Helping the old man had felt like the right thing to do, but was it enough? She asked herself if she was truly making a difference in the world, or just getting by, like everyone else. When she got home, her mother was already resting in the corner of the small living room. Maria kissed her forehead and began to prepare a simple meal. She was just setting the table when the doorbell rang. Maria froze, wondering who it could be. It was too late for anyone to be stopping by. She opened the door cautiously, and to her surprise, standing there was a delivery man holding a large envelope. "Is this for Maria Hernandez?" he asked. "Yes, that's me," she replied, confused. She signed for it, and the delivery man handed her the envelope before leaving without a word. Maria stared at the thick envelope in her hand. It was unmarked, no return address. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be something important? Something urgent? Her hands trembled as she carefully tore it open. Inside was a letter, folded neatly. She unfolded it, her eyes scanning the words written in elegant handwriting. "Dear Maria, you may not remember me, but I will never forget your kindness. The seat you gave up on the bus yesterday meant more than you know. I have seen many acts of kindness in my life, but yours stood out. I am a man of wealth, and I have watched you from afar. Your strength, your heart, and your quiet sacrifice have inspired me. I would like to offer you an opportunity that could change your life. Please meet me tomorrow at the address below. You may not believe this now, but this could be the start of something extraordinary. With respect, the elderly man from the bus. Maria's head spun. She couldn't make sense of it. Who was this person? And why would they be offering her an opportunity? She barely knew the man. And yet, his words were so heartfelt, so full of warmth. Her first instinct was to dismiss it as some sort of prank. But something deep inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time, made her hesitate. Could this really be happening? Was it possible that a simple act of kindness could lead to something this unexpected? The next morning, Maria woke up early. She hadn't slept much, the contents of the letter playing over and over in her mind. The sincerity in the man's words had left her unsettled, but also strangely hopeful. It had been so long since she had felt anything other than the weight of her responsibilities. She couldn't shake the idea that this might be her one chance at something better. She dressed carefully, choosing her nicest outfit, though it was simple and worn. She didn't have much, but she wanted to make a good impression. As she stepped outside, the morning air felt crisp and clean, almost as if it mirrored the fresh possibility she was walking into. Maria clutched the address written in the letter, double-checking it as she boarded the bus. The ride felt longer than usual. Each stop brought a mix of nerves and anticipation, her mind swirling with questions. What would this man be like? What kind of opportunity was he offering? Could she trust him? She was cautious by nature, but a part of her clung to the hope that this wasn't a cruel trick. The bus finally arrived at her destination, a quiet, upscale part of the city she had only seen from a distance. The buildings were sleek and modern, their glass facades reflecting the sunlight. Maria felt out of place, her scuffed shoes and worn coat contrasting sharply with the polished surroundings. She followed the directions, her heart pounding harder with each step. She reached the address, a towering building with an elegant entryway. The doorman greeted her with a polite nod, and she hesitated before stepping inside. The lobby was breathtaking: marble floors, high ceilings, and a grand chandelier that sparkled like diamonds. A receptionist behind a sleek desk smiled warmly at her. "Maria Hernandez?" the woman asked, her voice smooth and professional. Maria nodded, surprised that they were expecting her. "Right this way, please," the receptionist said, gesturing toward a hallway. Maria followed, her steps echoing in the quiet space. She was led to an elevator, which took her to one of the upper floors. When the doors opened, a man in a sharp suit was waiting for her. He introduced himself as Mr. Carter, a personal assistant to the elderly man. "This way, Miss Hernandez," he said, leading her down another hallway. Maria's palms were damp, and she clasped her hands tightly to hide her nervousness. They arrived at a large office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Inside, the elderly man from the bus was waiting. He was seated behind a massive desk, but he stood as she entered, his face breaking into a warm smile. "Maria," he said, his voice kind and welcoming. "Thank you for coming." Maria offered a hesitant smile, unsure of what to say. She felt small and overwhelmed, standing in the opulent office with its luxurious furnishings. The man motioned for her to sit in a chair opposite his desk. She did so, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm sure you have questions," the man began, his tone gentle. "And I will answer them all in time. But first, let me tell you why I invited you here." He paused, his gaze steady. "Your kindness touched me deeply. In a world where so many people are indifferent, you chose to help someone in need. That act of selflessness inspired me." Maria felt her cheeks flush. "It was just a small thing," she said softly. "Anyone would have done the same." The man shook his head. "No, Maria. Many people would have looked away, pretended not to see. But you didn't. And that says a lot about the kind of person you are." He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "I've spent my life building wealth and success, but what I value most is the ability to make a difference. I believe in helping those who help others. That's why I want to give you an opportunity, a chance to change your life. He handed her a folder, its leather cover embossed with his initials. Maria opened it cautiously, her eyes widening as she skimmed the contents. It was a job offer, a position as his personal assistant. The salary listed was more than she could have ever imagined earning, and the benefits included full medical coverage for her and her mother. Maria's hands trembled as she closed the folder. I don't understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Why me? I'm just an ordinary person. The man smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Because ordinary people like you make the world a better place. You deserve a chance to thrive, not just survive. Maria felt a lump in her throat. The offer was almost too good to be true. She had spent so long scraping by, constantly worrying about how to make ends meet. This could change everything. But a part of her was still skeptical. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice trembling. The man's smile deepened. Because someone once did the same for me. Many years ago, I was struggling, just as you are now. A stranger showed me kindness and gave me a chance. I've never forgotten it. This is my way of paying it forward. Tears welled in Maria's eyes as she nodded slowly. She wanted to believe him, to trust that this was real. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to repay you. You've already done more than you realize, he said. All I ask is that you use this opportunity to create a better future for yourself and those you care about. Maria left the office that day in a daze, the folder clutched tightly to her chest. She had a lot to think about, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to take the first step. When she got home, Maria shared the news with her mother, who was overwhelmed with emotion. The possibility of a stable job and the ability to afford proper care lifted a weight from both their shoulders. For the first time, they allowed themselves to dream of a brighter future. In the days that followed, Maria prepared for her new role with determination. She knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and she was determined to make the most of it. As she stepped into her new life, she carried with her the memory of the simple act of kindness that had set everything in motion. It was a reminder that even the smallest gestures could create ripples of change. Maria's story was just beginning, but she knew one thing for certain: she would never forget the elderly man from the bus and the extraordinary kindness he had shown her. The first day of Maria's new job felt surreal. She arrived at the towering office building earlier than scheduled, her nerves a mix of excitement and trepidation. The weight of her life's struggles was still fresh in her mind, but now there was a sense of possibility, a feeling that, perhaps, things might finally change for the better. Mr. Carter, the elderly man's assistant, greeted her warmly in the lobby. Good morning, Ms. Hernandez. Are you ready to begin? He asked with a smile. Maria nodded, gripping the strap of her bag tightly. I think so, she replied, though her voice wavered slightly. Excellent. Follow me, and I'll get you settled in. He led her to a private elevator, and within moments, they were on one of the highest floors of the building. The space was immaculate, every detail meticulously designed. Maria couldn't help but feel intimidated, but she pushed the feeling aside, reminding herself why she was there. Mr. Carter gave her a brief tour of the office and explained her responsibilities. The job involved managing schedules, coordinating meetings, and assisting with various projects. Though the tasks were new to her, she felt a strange confidence. If the elderly man believed in her, perhaps she could believe in herself too. Finally, Maria was shown to her workspace, a desk near the large corner office where the elderly man worked. He stepped out as they approached, greeting Maria with his characteristic warmth. Maria, I'm glad to see you here, he said. How are you feeling? Nervous, Maria admitted with a small smile. But also, hopeful. The man nodded. That's a good start. You'll do well, Maria. I'm confident in that. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder before returning to his office. Maria settled into her desk, taking a deep breath as she familiarized herself with the files and documents Mr. Carter had provided. The work required focus and organization, but she found herself enjoying the challenge. It was a far cry from the grueling shifts at the store, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was contributing to something meaningful. As the weeks went by, Maria grew more comfortable in her role. The elderly man, whom she now knew as Mr. Rowland, often stopped by her desk to check on her progress or offer words of encouragement. His mentorship was gentle but effective, and Maria found herself thriving under his guidance. She also began to notice the subtle ways in which Mr. Rowland supported her beyond the office. One afternoon, Maria received a call from her mother's doctor, informing her that additional medical treatments had been arranged and fully covered. Maria's heart swelled with gratitude, knowing this was Mr. Rowland's doing. Though he never mentioned it, his quiet acts of generosity spoke volumes. The transformation in Maria's life extended beyond financial stability. For the first time, she felt valued and capable. Her confidence grew with each passing day, and she began to see herself in a new light. The shy, overworked cashier was gone, replaced by a woman who believed she had a future worth fighting for. One evening, as Maria stayed late to finish organizing a project, Mr. Rowland appeared in her doorway. "You're working too hard, Maria," he said with a chuckle. Maria looked up, smiling. "I just want to make sure everything is perfect." "It already is," he replied. "But there's something I'd like to discuss with you." Curious, Maria set aside her work and gave him her full attention. Mr. Rowland stepped into the room and leaned against the desk, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he began. "Not just for myself, but for the legacy I want to leave behind. Maria, you have something special, a kindness and strength that are rare in this world. I'd like to involve you in something more significant." Maria blinked, unsure of what he meant. "More significant?" He nodded. "I want to start a foundation, something dedicated to helping people like you, those who work tirelessly but never seem to catch a break. I believe you're the perfect person to help me lead this initiative." Maria's breath caught in her throat. "Me? Lead a foundation? I don't know if I'm qualified." Mr. Rowland smiled. "You're more than qualified, Maria. You've lived the struggles we aim to address. You understand them in a way no one else could. That perspective is invaluable." Maria felt a mix of emotions: honor, fear, and excitement all at once. The idea of making a broader impact was daunting, but it also filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Say you'll think about it," Mr. Rowland replied. "This isn't something that needs an immediate answer. I just want you to consider the possibilities." Maria nodded, her mind racing with thoughts of what this could mean. As Mr. Rowland left her office, she sat in silence, trying to absorb the enormity of what he had proposed. The following days were a blur as Maria tried to process her feelings. The idea of helping others in the way Mr. Rowland had helped her was deeply appealing, but it also felt overwhelming. Could she truly rise to such a challenge? One evening, as she sat with her mother, Maria shared the news. Her mother's eyes filled with pride, and she reached out to take Maria's hand. "You've always had a big heart," her mother said softly. "If anyone can make a difference, it's you." Those words stayed with Maria as she continued to reflect on the opportunity. She realized that everything she had endured, the struggles, the sacrifices, the moments of despair, had prepared her for this moment. She had been given a chance to create change, not just for herself but for others like her. When Maria finally returned to Mr. Rowland with her decision, she stood a little taller, her voice steady. "I'd be honored to help lead the foundation," she said. "Thank you for believing in me." Mr. Rowland's face lit up with a smile. "You won't regret this, Maria. Together, we're going to change lives." And so, Maria's journey took yet another unexpected turn. As she dove into her new role with the foundation, she discovered a passion for helping others that gave her life new meaning. Her story became an inspiration to many, a testament to the power of kindness and the extraordinary ripple effects it could create. Years later, Maria would look back on that rainy afternoon when she gave up her bus seat and marvel at how one small act had transformed her world. It was a reminder that even the simplest gestures could spark a chain of events far greater than she could have ever imagined.